うまいかまずいか言ってみな。
Shokugeki no Soma was one of the anime series that I immediately got hooked onto. I remember watching the first episode and thinking, wow, this anime is ridiculous. I love it. It was one of those animes that had an immediate strong first impression on me, and I loved everything about the first episode, from the beautifully drawn dishes that make my mouth water, the literal foodgasms the characters experience, the way it makes the cooking look more intense than having Gordon Ramsay yell at you,
Raj, move your fat fucking ass!
And the tentacle. I was sold on the first episode, and after I caught up with the anime, I decided to catch up with the manga. It was a fun read, and after every chapter, I couldn't wait to see how the food porn would look when animated. I read through the manga, got thrown for a loop at the central arc, obsessed over Rindo, and had fun. But then the hot spring investigation arc happened, and while it started off alright, the rest of the manga was an absolute disaster. Before I go any further, spoilers for anyone who has only seen the anime. And with that out of the way, let's continue. Yes, the manga ran into some issues, and a lot of readers jumped ship. How did it turn out like this? Now, I'm pretty lenient when consuming media, especially anime, and I can overlook a lot of things most people would have problems with, but I still think that there were several problems with the manga in the later chapters. I'm gonna break down the two big reasons why I believe Shokugeki no Soma dipped in quality significantly after the central arc, the Le Cuisine Noirs, and Saiba Asahi. So, the Dark Chefs, which I will refer to them as such, as opposed to Les Cuisiniers Noirs, so that I don't butcher the French language any more than I already have. Like many other shonen, Shokugeki faced the escalation problem, where the power levels of characters reach absurd heights. And that was the reason for the Dark Chefs and Asahi to be introduced. The writer felt that he needed new villains with abilities to one-up the previous chefs and increase the stakes. But that is the trap most shonens fall into. I think that you don't need to keep escalating the stakes and power levels to write good shonen. Let's take an example from My Hero Academia. Spoiler warning for anime only people. After the Provisional Hero License exam arc, the heroes face off against a new villain Overhaul while dealing with the quirk-destroying drug, which has the potential to throw the hero society into chaos. After the Shi Hasaikai arc, we go back to smaller scale stories with the Remedial Course arc and the School Festival arc. These arcs are more contained than the previous ones and doesn't involve a whole lot of escalation, yet they're still interesting because they're character driven or still push the story overall. The students are improving as heroes and training their abilities, but it isn't in an attempt to one-up the last conflicts. Back to Shokugeki, the arc after the Central and Regimental Shokugeki arc would have been better if it was more personal and smaller scale, because those types of storylines have a bigger impact on the audience as opposed to huge world-ending events or a big bad villain who absolutely crushes the protagonist. Much like the Super Crown, the Dark Chefs were a mistake. The introduction of superhuman powers and their cooking methods were too absurd and came out of nowhere that it didn't feel organic in the story. It would have been fine if chefs with superpowers and insane cooking methods were eased into the story. Other examples of superhuman powers in cooking in the manga were Hayama's sense of smell and Arena's god tongue, which are acceptable because in real life, there are people who have such keen senses that it almost seems superhuman. The cooking methods were pretty much always within the realms of realism, at least enough to maintain our suspension of disbelief. When you suddenly introduce a chef that uses a chainsaw laced with spices or a clown that juggles his meat in spherical containers to make his meat tender, or whatever the hell this is, it becomes so jarring and inorganic that the audience becomes confused and unhappy. A decent remedy would have been to introduce similar cooking styles that were completely unrealistic early on and have the audience grow accustomed to that, like they know what to expect. But personally, I feel that these dark chefs should have just been excluded altogether, or at the very least, the whole concept of superhuman powers using cooking should have been kept in check. I think another problem was that Soma achieved the goal of becoming the first seat, which I think should not have happened, at least not right away. After the Regimental Shokugeki, he really should have been put lower in the Elite 10 and have him work his way up. This would also have given the story more focus on the characters going through their second year in Totsuki, and we could have explored the dynamics between Soma and his peers and even his senpai, all while being part of the Elite 10 Council.
一つのものを作り上げたいと思っておりますの。大切な学友葉山くんに同年代のお友達が。つきましてはこの書類にサインは。
Let's get on to the second point of interest, or rather uninterest. Saiba Asahi, Soma's lost brother. When I reread the chapters after the Regimental Shokugeki arc, I realized how awful of a character Asahi was. One of the first things about Asahi that I saw people complain about is that upon his introduction, he defeats Saiba, Soma's father, really easily. And many saw it as poor writing, since Soma surpassing his father was the very essence of his motivation as a character. From the beginning of the series, he had always been trying to defeat his father in a cooking match, and he lost every time. He is motivated to become the very best and become a better chef than his father. And his father was without a doubt the best chef in his generation. Yet this new villain that was just suddenly introduced was able to swiftly defeat him. But in my opinion, Asahi defeating Saiba wasn't necessarily as bad of a decision as people made it out to be. Shokugeki made the right decision in giving Soma a power ceiling to aim towards near the beginning of the manga. Introducing a power ceiling near the beginning of the series is what My Hero Academia did, where Midoriya's power ceiling is All Might and his goal is to become the #1 hero. For Soma, the goal is still there, surpassing the chef who defeated his father. This still gives him an equivalent goal of surpassing him, albeit in a roundabout way. Soma defeats Asahi and proves himself to his father, and an implication could have been made that if they did face off in the future, then Soma has a good chance of defeating his father, thus reaching that power ceiling. It's not the best solution, but the point I'm making is that Asahi defeating Saiba wasn't a horrible decision, and it didn't necessarily make the foundation of the series defunct. The real problem with Asahi defeating Saiba, however, is that Asahi, much like the superpowered chefs, came out of nowhere. We were given almost no indication of Asahi's existence or the fact that Soma has a secret brother. It would have been better if his presence had been hinted at by Saiba throughout the manga so that his appearance and defeating of Saiba wasn't so sudden, and also to establish the possibility of there being a chef that could already surpass him. That way, Soma's goal of becoming a better chef than his father would change organically into his goal of defeating Asahi instead. But honestly, a better solution would probably have been to just get rid of Asahi and the Dark Chefs altogether. Just snap them away. Have the story focus on the existing characters' arc, like Soma's goal of making Arina say his food is delicious, or the personal relationship between Arina and her mother. Wait, so I just talked about how Asahi defeating Soma's father could still work, and yet I'm saying that he shouldn't be in the manga? Well, yes, but actually no. Although I said that Asahi could have worked had he been properly introduced, it was probably best he didn't exist at all, or at least he was written completely differently than what was given to us. This is because in his core, Asahi is just an awfully written character. Even if the changes I talked about did work out and he was introduced in a better way, he's just so abysmally written that he ended up becoming my most hated character in the manga. And to show how much I dislike him, I'm gonna give a TLDR of his synopsis and explain all the things that are wrong with him. Asahi is introduced as this dark chef that is incredibly talented, and the first time we actually see him, he just takes down Saiba. Again, I did say that at least Soma still has that goal that he's going for, that he's trying to surpass his dad by surpassing Asahi, so this part isn't that bad. So right after we see him take down Saiba, he's a professor at Totsuki. Does Totsuki not do background checks for the people they entrust the future generations to? How does Asahi, under an alias, easily get into Totsuki, the most prestigious culinary institute in all of Japan? You know, Sensei Mon, the former director of the academy, was referred to as a mafia don. So now I'm just imagining Asahi infiltrating Totsuki as the equivalent to infiltrating the mafia. I guess if you think of it like that, it's a way of showing how much power he has in the cooking underworld, so maybe this is okay. I'll begrudgingly give him that. One of the worst parts about him though is how pervy and overbearing he is. When he walks into the class, all the girls swoon over him about how good looking he is, and when Soma and Megumi meet up with him, they found out that his goal is to make Arina his wife. Okay. The manga just felt like it was shifting towards fanfic, and it's weird. Asahi, the villain, is trying to win over Arina's heart, but Soma's like, no, her tongue is mine. Yeah, he actually says that according to this translation. This was probably done to appeal to Serena fans, but it was just done so poorly that it just came across as pandering. So, Asahi is trying to make Arina his wife, but the way he goes about doing this is just so creepy. He carries Irina's unconscious self after his Shokugeki with Soma and flirts with her. And this is literally how Irina first interacts with him. Now, some people may say that it's romantic or that it's not even that bad, but it gets worse. So over time, Asahi keeps visiting Irina and soliciting her, bringing her bouquets and just trying to bother her in an attempt to make her his wife. This isn't romantic. It borderline feels like he's going to force himself on her sometime soon. You see this image? The image I'm showing you right now? Yeah. I fucking hate this. Stop trying to shove him down our throats. He's not Prince Charming. Constantly bothering someone and openly expressing that you want to marry her is creepy. The last time I tried doing that to a girl, I almost got put on the sex offender list. Alright, but Asahi's a pretty boy, so I guess it's okay. And if for some reason you still don't think that it's not that bad, I repeat myself, it gets worse. Asahi literally has someone kidnap her and ties her up in his palace. Yeah, nice looking palace you got there, bud. I wish my house looked like a crack house. What even is going on? You tried to make us like this villain, but then you have him do something like this? So after he ties her up and brings her to his house, he then challenges her to a cooking contest and declares that if she loses, then she must be his wife. Huh? Are you telling me that this is your grand plan of getting her hand in marriage? I understand that the rules of the Shokugeki are absolute, but at that moment she had no reason to accept this challenge. Also, back a few chapters, when he led these dark chefs to Japan, he told them about the Shokugeki and how they could use it to challenge chefs and take them down. He said that it is Japan's pride, and if you just belittle them, they'll accept, and you can demand anything you want from them if you win. But last time I checked, you needed Totsuki officials to judge the match in order for it to be a legitimate Shokugeki, and that it was only something exclusive to Totsuki, not on the front lines. So yeah, that was just another minor issue I had regarding the story, so I kinda went on a tangent there. Well, again, if she loses the cooking match, she'll be his wife. And he says that the challenge will take place in Blue, which is like this huge cooking championship tournament thing, and it's like a big deal. Was it really necessary to kidnap her to tell her that? I mean, you already harass her every day. Couldn't you have told her that during one of your daily uninvited visits? This just seems like a really terrible way to get someone to like you. I'm pretty sure girls don't like being tied to a chair like that. Okay, maybe some do. We don't know what Irina's kinks are. So then everyone goes to Blue and they have cooking fights and we see the stupid superhuman powers the dark chefs have. But Asahi's powers is that he takes the cooking tools of other chefs and then he inherits those superhuman powers. And he can wield multiple tools and mix those powers together to create the absolute best dishes. Yeah, that's how they escalate the villain's power level. Like I said, there's really no need to escalate the power levels by this much. We already have personal conflicts in this arc. It would have been just as good if all the other competitors were given Elite 10 levels because the important part was the personal character arcs and conflicts that our protagonists go through. There's a part in the manga where we see Asahi's past and why he hates Soma so much. So when he was a child, his alcoholic mom abused him, and after she died, he ended up in an orphanage where he was found by Saiba, Soma's father. Saiba took him in, but after Saiba's wife died, he returned to Japan to take care of his son. And so Asahi resented Soma for stealing his father. I understand that this is supposed to be a flaw in his character, and maybe the writer wanted us to feel empathetic to him, but he just comes across as this entitled brat. Okay, so anyways, Asahi gets owned by Soma, and so fails his quest for a waifu. Then he gets forgotten, I think? We find out why he wanted Irina as a wife, but the rest of it was just really forgettable. The last chapters just kind of wrap up the remaining subplots with Irina's mother and the Blue competition. It's not an incredibly satisfying ending. I would have been disappointed that the manga was over, but the quality of the last arc just helped me get over it. Again, I'd like to say that I think it would have been an improvement if the story after Regimental Shokugeki had shifted its focus back onto school life like it did in the early chapters. A compelling story involving the characters we've already grown attached to and love would have been so much better. We didn't need to see them constantly breaking through their ceiling as long as there is an emotional connection between the characters and the audience, and the plot is interesting enough to play around with their character dynamics. I would have loved to see how Soma and his friends get along with their former enemies as part of the Elite 10 Council, and how they would use their new positions to further themselves as characters. A great example was the beach exam arc, which takes place between the Hot Springs investigation and Blue arcs, during which I had completely forgotten the corner the author wrote himself in, and had fun reading it and seeing the new challenges our characters face as Elite 10 members. Please, you should have just given us more of that. More of that.
Wow.
But the writer decided to go down the escalation route and gave us Asahi. I know I'm coming down hard on the manga, but it's only because I really like the series as a whole and I really like these characters, especially Rindo. There were some truly good moments in the Blue arc, however. The one that stood out to me most was the Shokugeki involving the former Dark Chef and the former war veteran who had planned on committing suicide after he judged the plate. The theme for the challenge was a dish fit to be his last supper. Soma's dish not only fulfilled that, but he also changed the old man's mind about killing himself after Soma lectured him on the infinite possibilities that the culinary world can produce. Another part that I really liked about the arc was the other reason why Azumi decided to go through with his true gourmet plan in the previous arcs. I feel that it should have been shown during the central arc to make him a more compelling villain, however. There were touching moments in this arc, and it really could have worked had it not been for Asahi being poorly written and the Dark Chefs. Regardless, I'm still gonna watch the anime series since I still enjoy the other characters, especially Rindo. And I still remember how much fun I had when I first watched this anime. It's a shame that the manga turned out the way it did, but at least we're given the epilogue, Lead Dessert, which at least made up for it somewhat. It was a fun journey full of humor and even emotional scenes that I never expected to get out of a cooking manga. While at the same time being completely ridiculous and absolutely absurd. In the end, the manga started out strong but finished weak. It may have been rushed, but it was still an ending that I can't at the very least accept since it's open-ended, and as a fan, I guess I'm free to imagine how the rest of the time in Totsuki is like, and I can savor that. Oh, and also this from the epilogue chapter.